So at this point, we know how to relate between the real GDP and the aggregate expenditure. In the coming unit, we will talk in more details about the real GDP under fixed prices and the aggregate expenditure. So let's see. So according to our graph, the parts of the expenditure is divided into two parts. Induced expenditure, which are related to the GDP, it is actually affected by the GDP, and those are the consumption and the imports. On the other hand, we have autonomous expenditure, which are irrelated to the GDP or not affected by the GDP, which are the investment, the government purchases, the exports. So consumption, imports varies with the GDP, where investment, government purchase, and exports do not vary with the GDP. Now I want to draw your attention to actual expenditure, planned expenditure, and real GDP. Actual expenditure and real GDP are the same. However, they are different than the planned expenditure. And this difference comes from the unplanned change in inventory. What do we mean by that? To understand this, let's see this story. Well, companies usually will start planning for the future production period by trying to figure out or expect how much sales that they're gonna do. Sometimes their expectations are in place, another time their expectations are not in place. So the managers usually will make a meeting and they will try to figure out how much sales do we expect and how much inventory do we plan to have by the end of this period, and they may have some scenarios like these. So in the first scenario, they expected to have a 10,000 units of sales, and they are planning for a 2,000 unit inventory by the end of the year. However, their actual sales was 9,000. So they ended up with unplanned increase in inventory. So if you are the head of this company and your inventory is higher than what you planned, will this encourage you for more production or for less production? Of course, the answer will be for less production, because I didn't fulfill my goals and I wasn't able to make the sales that I was planning to, so I ended up with an inventory that wasn't sold. So it's better to decrease our production. If all the companies in one economy had the same result, we will end up all of them reducing their production, and this will target recession. Let's talk about the second scenario. The second scenario, we are talking about 10,000 in sales, 2,000 in planned inventory. However, we were lucky enough to sell 11,000. So we had unplanned decrease in inventory. Things had a happy ending for a company. They actually make a sales more than they expected. They had an unplanned decrease in inventory. This will encourage them for more production, more employment of labor, and thus, if this is a general condition, this could lead to expansion. And we have actually the third scenario, where the sales and the inventory was matched with reality, and here we have no change. And here we know what do mean by planned expenditure, which is different than the actual expenditure due to the unplanned change in inventory. Well, the sales and inventory are the real GDP. The actual sales, we can say that they represent, in the case of economy, the aggregate expenditure, and we have the unplanned decrease and increase in inventory. Now let's talk about the equilibrium in the case of aggregate expenditure graphically. So the equilibrium expenditure occurs when the aggregate planning inventory equals the real inventory which actually equals the actual expenditure. So to understand this, we're going to draw two panels. In the upper panel, we have the real GDP and the aggregate expenditure. And in the lower panel, we have the real GDP and the unplanned changes in inventory. And still we have our friend, the 45 degrees lines, where X equals Y. And in this case, our real GDP equal the planned expenditure. So in the area before the point D, the point over the 45 degrees line, where the real GDP equals the aggregate planned inventory, we can see that the aggregate expenditure is above the real GDP, which means that we have unplanned decrease in inventory. This will encourage companies to produce more, and as they produce more, GDP will increase and we will reach the equilibrium where the GDP equals the aggregate planned expenditure and there is no unplanned change in inventory. So what if we are beyond the D? In this case, we will see that the GDP is actually above the aggregate expenditure, which means that we have unplanned increase in inventory, and this will target recession as companies will cut their production, in order to minimize their inventories, and we will reach the equilibrium again. So before point D, we have unplanned decrease in inventory, encouraging companies to increase their production. Then we will reach the equilibrium point at the point D. After this point, we will see that the real GDP is higher than the aggregate expenditure, and we will have unplanned increase in inventory, causing the companies to cut their production, and we're gonna reach equilibrium again. Now we are at our end of this unit, which talks about the real GDP under fixed prices, the relationship between the real GDP and the aggregate expenditure. We are ready to talk about the multiplier, what do you mean by that, and how does it affect our economy.